morning, everyone, and welcome to our session today. I'm Norman, CTO of Prescient Investment Management, and with me is my team of very smart people. I have Tim on the right-hand side. He's the head of our data science team, our talented data scientist, Chloe, as well as our head of data engineering, Louis. Today's session is not a keynote session, it's just an open conversation of what's happening behind the scenes with regards to Prescient investment and how we run systems and decisions and models and all the data that we're processing in order to get the best insights out of everything that we use in our investment space. But before we get into that, why Prescient? Louis, if you can give us a little bit of a breakdown of why Prescient.
Thanks, Norman. It's good to be here. Thanks, Tim and Chloe. It's a privilege to sit beside these two. Prescient, and why Prescient? So Prescient has been around for about 27 years now. What is the essence of Prescient Investment Management, or what is our philosophy? We are all about smart people, data, technology, and that's why we're around this table. We believe in creating certainty for our clients. We are systematic investment managers. What does that mean? It means that we follow the evidence. We're into evidence-based investing. And how does that fit into why we are here? I think the main reason is it's data, it's smart people, and it's technology. It really is what it says in what we believe in. And I guess when it comes to the data and the technology, a lot of buzz terms are thrown around the industry, data science and AI. And a question I actually wanted to ask you, Chloe, tell us a little bit about, or demystify this data science. It's been around for a while now. What does a data scientist do, and what is this data science all about?
Sure. So data science is the process of analyzing data to extract meaningful insights and use that to inform decisions. So it combines fields like mathematics, statistics, computer science, and very importantly, domain knowledge of the domain you are applying the data science techniques to. So another way I can describe it is we're sort of detectives for data, so we really just sift through large, complex data sets to try and uncover patterns or trends, any insights that might have been overlooked. The human mind really struggles to try and find such detail in such large amounts of data, which is why we leverage these techniques to try and give us a bit of an edge in the industry.
That's fantastic.
Hope that answers.
Yeah, I like the detective part.
Yeah.
The detective part
Makes
is very,
it sound
very
fun.
cool. Yeah. Definitely, especially because of the amounts of data. So Tim, from your side, the amounts of data, I can only imagine. Well, actually, I do know, but please elaborate for us.
Yeah, you know all too well. So the thing with data science is the more information you can gather, the more clear picture you can form, the more explainable you can make things. If you're missing data, then you're never going to have a perfect view on what's happening in reality. But the more you can gather, the better you can build out that picture. And that's the whole thing with data science. It also allows you to gather this data from all sorts of different sources and get that into your process. And that's where it becomes quite valuable in the investment world. The markets are complicated. There's so many factors that influence the market. There's human emotions influencing it. That's quite a large driver of it, actually. There's also the thing, even the weather we sometimes believe has an influence in the market. It could really be anything.
Wow.
So that's incredible. So tell me a little bit about then the AI component of it, because if data science, AI, it's used interchangeably. It's used, it's all the rage right now. How does AI fit in with finance, with data science, and how are we thinking about AI at Prescient?
Yeah. So AI again is another buzzword, but what it means basically is an encapsulation of everything that's a smarter system. It could just be something that says, if this, then that. Could be as simple as that. Could be as complex as a model that works on how your brain works with neurons. could be anything. Generative AI, that's all the hype right now, that's part of it as well. It's really a broad outlook on it. How we think about it in Prescient is we want to cut through all of this buzz and all of this noise and use really what gives value, what's explainable, what we can use in our investment processes to actually give an edge and that actually means something that you can explain as well.
100%.
But then at the same time, to be able to do that, and as we said again, this large amount of data that we need to bring in, we need the infrastructure for that to be able to do it fast and to be able to do it accurately. So Norman, maybe give us a bit of your perspective on what it takes to get this infrastructure into the right place.
Sure. Maybe before I get to the infrastructure, let's maybe talk about the sources of data and how those pipelines work in your space, Louis, before we even get to the infrastructure that processes this data.
Yeah, I mean, first to your point, all about the explainability and the transparency. It also comes down to what is the data that we actually use, and it is, after all, smart people, data, and technology. So the data and technology side sits with mostly with us, with me and my team. We gather data from all types of sources. Mostly it's econometric, time series data, finance data, hard numbers, soft numbers. What does that mean? It means some things in some time series in the line of sentiment. Those would be your softer numbers. Other numbers such as real GDP. I believe your team is looking into all sorts of alternative data, which we will get into in a little while. But when it comes to sources and then also processing these sources, we look at the standard channels, your big data providers such as Bloomberg and that type of stuff. But we also have a vast amount of derived data that we calculate from these data sources, raw data. And what does that mean for how we use data at Prescient? It means that we need to be disciplined in the way in which we process our data. The best way I can describe it is we pursue high quality automated data. That means our data pipelines need to be disciplined, our data warehouses and the way in which we store data, the governance, how we assure quality, that's all within my team, and that needs to be a systematic approach to managing our data. And that is, I can probably bore you for days about all the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts of it, but essentially it's summed up as, if we want to pursue evidence-based investing, our data foundation needs to be in place for anything machine learning related, AI related, investment related, and just pure analytics related. And that brings us to the infrastructure we need to support these types of this data foundation and the processes that run on top of that. Norman, what is your view on where we need to be headed to be able to support the 500 million data points we touch on a daily basis, and that's just to support decision making? We haven't even brought in the big data requirements that your team is working on.
100%. So infrastructure is probably the portion that supports out of, if we have to look at a digital transformation, for example, people, process, platform. I would say the platform part supports the process as well as the people, and that's kind of what you were speaking about. And that's why I try to always look at it as an agnostic approach. There's various solutions out there, but it's about choosing the best solution. It's about fine-tuning those solutions and the infrastructure itself in order to cater for the specific space, your specific needs. And the only way we can really achieve that is, fortunately, we have multiple cloud providers, so that's probably the best place that we could go. Even processing our models, or models that, for example, in the data science team that they're utilizing, those all run in GPUs, versus trying to do this on an on-premise space. So creating that hybrid scenario in order to be able to be scalable and resilient and reliable in our data. The cloud is our way that we utilize our infrastructure, and best part is it's all as code. We spin them up and scale as we need, and that's the best part about infrastructure in the cloud. And that leads back to that alternative data, for example. So I don't know if you can speak about that and how we're utilizing the cloud as well to run those workloads.
Yeah, exactly, Norman. That's the nice thing with having this infrastructure in place, is now we have the capability of getting this information we need to make a bigger picture. So this information, this alternative data that we're looking at, is not just normal data that you would find in the financial context, like pricing and financial ratios and this kind of thing. We're actually trying to incorporate the different side. So one thing that we've been looking at recently is what the Federal Reserve Bank is saying in their speeches. And what this allows, it allows a bit of the human element. What are they saying? How are they saying it? And even just the tone that they're saying an individual sentence in can give us an indication of what they're thinking they're going to do with their interest rates. And this is very interesting because the Federal Reserve in the past has been speaking, they call it Fed speak, but now we can actually start cutting through that a little bit and finding the patterns in how they speak and creating an indicator out of that.
Oh, wow.
This is some really interesting things that we can find out of alternative data. Chloe, you maybe have some other ideas as well there of what we can do with alternative data.
So I'd rather speak about the importance of incorporating all this additional data into the investment management process. So there is an astronomical amount of data out there, and the machine learning algorithms have become so powerful at extracting insights from that if you are not using data science techniques to assist your investment management process, you really fall the risk of falling behind and not being so competitive in this investment management space. I don't know if you guys actually knew, but the investment industry was one of the first early adopters of data science techniques for that exact reason, to be competitive, to inform better decision making. So it's really important, and firms that do use it really reap the benefits of it. Being able to detect market trends shifting, doing that earlier than their competitors really brings an edge to the players who wish to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, because in essence, for example, on Louis' side, the data sources, that's a systematic scenario where it's daily that would come in, versus this approach gives you a completely different insight into the data, and it even gives the supportive decisions around what we're doing and what moves we are making next.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
If you think about a more traditional old school investment firm, you've got analysts manually poring over thousands of stock reports or economic indicators. That is a very slow process. I imagine a very painful process. Whereas using data science techniques, we can crunch these numbers in, honestly, it's a matter of seconds, and try and extract information from there. Something that a human might miss, we really use these advanced models, AI. Sometimes it's also just old school analytical techniques though. It's not all about AI. Data science covers a little bit more than that. And this really helps us take going from a very manual process that is prone to errors into a very automatic process that you can crunch all the possibilities, all the numbers very quickly, very reliably. We do a lot of testing, a lot of back testing. It's a very quantitative process that we go through. It's also got a slight creativity and like a problem-solving aspect to it though, for us to try and come up with hypotheses or try and find trends in data that people haven't uncovered yet. It's quite a creative process.
That's why I like the detective analogy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's exactly that. That
exactly.
is actually amazing.
So Tim and I often sit and we chat and we work through this exploratory process together, and we go back and forth and we bounce ideas off of each other. We also include the rest of the investment team in this. We don't work in isolation. So we'll sit with the bonds team, the equities team, all of them, and they will help us come up with ideas, because their domain knowledge is just so impressive that they really can help us through that process. And then once we have an idea of what might work, that might help their asset class going forward, we will go forth and code and build whatever needs to be built, or build whatever needs to be built, test it, go through that process, but we don't work in isolation.
So we've got head in the clouds. What did the Fed say? Data detective. I guess the question is, like, we've got a lot of things that are being, a lot of concepts and a lot of data crunching that's happening, but how does this help the investment team? You mentioned, you don't work in isolation, or we don't work in isolation. This is a means to an end. Where do we see this type of stuff? What's the, do you present to the investment team and say, hey, this is what the Fed said? How are we able to access this information? What is your process on this?
Yeah, so the whole thing is, what data science does, it gives us this little bit of an edge. It gives us that X factor, that slight wild card in the investment mix as well. Because this is something that not a lot of other places are looking at, or not a lot of other people will be aware of. It gives us that slight edge. And how we can use that edge is, eventually we have our data set, we'll parse that down into something that's usable. So at the end of it, we'll get basically a timeline or a series. And because Prescient is such a systematic investment firm, all of the other investment processes run the same way. So then it becomes a simple case of plugging in our series, even though the models in the back end of it are different. Because everything in Prescient is set up correctly, it makes it very easy to just plug that series in, and then we can immediately start seeing, does this generate alpha? Does it not generate alpha? And that's the easiest way that we can do it, to get it into our processes.
Fantastic. And when it comes to, with the speak of AI, I think the biggest concern that's been presented nowadays is literally around the governance thereof, the control of data. Is our intellectual property being leaked? That type of scenario. So, for example, in Louis' space, as well as me in the sporting scenario, it's all about the governance, ensuring that the data is safe, and that we also do our guardrails within the cloud, as well as our infrastructure guardrails, and that supports that intellectual property being protected, right? When it comes to AI, though, there's also this generative AI, and I think that's what created the big buzzword, because it became available to everybody. Can you give one of you give a distinguishment between the generative AI and what people use as a use case, and they think they are using AI, versus what we're doing with AI?
Yeah, sure. I can give an overview of that. So what you typically find with someone using generative AI is they'll use it to maybe get a couple of ideas for a talk they're doing. If you have to give a wedding speech, you can run it through generative AI and get some ideas. So this is typically what you find. Or to help you with some coding, if you don't know a concept, let it explain the concept to you, maybe write yourself some code. But the way that we're seeing generative AI is a tool that we can actually use to gain insight. And what that means is we can build custom versions of these generative AI tools that are ring-fenced, so that there's no possibility of data leaking out whatsoever, keeps us secure, keeps our clients secure, and then at the same time, while we're doing that, because we're building it in a custom way, we can do with it exactly what we want. If we want to make it easier for internal teams to do something, if they just can ask a question quickly, get an immediate answer, get immediate value out of that, that's amazing. That saves days or weeks of time. And that's where I see the value of AI sitting. So not even necessarily a chatbot, but something where you can ask it a question about your organization, your processes, and it gives you an answer immediately. I don't know what you think of this, Louis, because we're kind of working on this together as well.
Yeah, I think from what we're seeing at this point is to your point of data leakage and data security and all of that is, I guess a big question is around the architecture of this technology. If I go and I take confidential client data and I just go and paste it into a ChatGPT that is open source or whatever it is, and believe me, that has happened at other organizations, and it is, data leakage and cybersecurity is a big thing at this point. what is it that around the technology that makes it better? Because I can't download a ChatGPT onto my computer, or I can, but it would be really, really slow. And that is where the infrastructure comes in. We were able to use things like, for example, an Amazon Bedrock. If you don't know what that is, you can go Google it. But it's basically an environment where we're able to go and store our data in the cloud that is completely locked down. And then we can start bringing in AI tools that are able to help us to prototype faster, to generate insights faster. And that is what I believe is the smart way for us to be able to experiment with AI and to build robustly with AI in a way that it's not inadvertently suddenly leaking out, or we inadvertently expose certain things, making sure the guardrails are in place as we build tools that help us create more certainty and help us to glean more and more evidence from an ever-growing data pool. Tell us a bit more about what does data security mean to you, Norman?
So data security is probably one of my highest topics. It's very important, you know. I come from a background that's not necessarily financial, and I think that's the beauty of this collaboration. It's the ability for this specific financial institution to take people from different walks and actually drive that innovation, right? And the big thing about the spaces that I came from was all about data security. It was about ensuring that those guardrails are in place, that those policies are all set, and that we are matching with regards to compliance that is coming up. And there is quite a few compliance that's coming up in the next year, probably the next few months. There is going to be a specific around AI as well, and there's going to be even extra guardrails that's going to be put into play. I mean, like about a year ago, I remember I was at a conversation or something like this, but the big topic was all about the governance of data and how people would be training on specific models that is not, it's not storing it in a safe and secure way. Especially from a chat bot scenario, you are chatting to something, and yes, it goes to an LLM in the background, but what happens to that chat conversation prior to reaching the LLM? And that is where compliance and regulatory comes into play. And I think that focus has always been my focus, and that's why we've always been building with regards to security first. So that's generally the approach from our side, yeah.
So Norman, to your point, you know, we've spoken about LLMs, it's bedrocks, and it's AI, and it's data science, and we specifically also data security, and kind of like the governance and data foundation, which are the boring but very, very important components of this. Why don't we take it back to the innovation side of it? I mentioned earlier about alternative data. Tim, Chloe, what have you been doing in the alternative data space?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, because there's actually a lot of interesting things going on at the moment. We're trying to really foster this environment of creativity, of innovation. Like we've said, there's the whole world open to us. That's very, very exciting. It's one of the projects that I'm quite excited about, and that's coming up, is looking into flights. You mentioned this earlier as well, Lou, but if we can see how people are moving throughout the world, that gives us a very powerful lens on how economies are shaping up, which countries are traveling a lot, which countries people are traveling to. This is all very powerful economic indicators that often go overlooked. I mean, tourism is one of the biggest sectors. So we can look at that. There's even ideas floating around of satellite images. This is how broad it can go. Not just normal data anymore. Now we're looking at satellite imagery. What can we get out of that? Can we maybe see how trucks are moving around? Can we see which service depots have the most trucks standing in them? How that's moving around? It creates this massive network of data that we can just get information out of, and that drives our investment process. But all of this at the same time would mean nothing if we couldn't show it and couldn't get it part of our investment processes. And that's where our portal really comes in. And Louis here is really the expert in our portal, so I'm going to let him talk to you about that.
Yeah, the portal, the Prime portal, the Prescient Research Investment Management Engine. It's our internal decision-making tool that we use to support this evidence-based investing. It supports our view of the world, or it helps us with our view of the world. It supports portfolio managers with their day-to-day decision-making when they are moving things around in terms of their portfolios, in terms of research. It really is the heartbeat of our investment decision-making process. By the way, we have a client-facing evolution of this product, or not a product, but of this platform coming, where we would love to facilitate transparency. Often when we sit with investors, within clients, they are very much keen on seeing, like, for themselves, what are our views of the world? That is a really exciting thing that we are going to be launching in the near future, to be able to give our clients, advisors, day-to-day investors a peek into our worldview and how we see the world on a daily basis. Asset allocations, our proprietary Prescient economic indicator is also featuring there to an extent, where it's really a model about where we really consider it all. You were mentioning flights data. That model considers rental data, economic data, all sorts of hard and soft numbers, as we mentioned earlier, to give us a nowcast of the economy of a specific country. You know, US, South Africa. We have some European countries in there as well. Things that are absolutely ever evolving, and the stuff we want to bring to this Prescient Insights platform would be more of your data science tooling that I know is busy being developed and prototyped, and all with the purpose of, we want to show clients how we are creating certainty. We want to create transparency. We want to use technology to support the decision making that we are busy with, and share it with the world, essentially. So Norman, that is it from a process and a platform perspective.
From my side, I feel actually proud, because this is probably the reason why we are the future of investment, right? That's the ability for us to be able to think outside of the box, really take things to the next era. And I'm excited for even your projects that is going to be launching.
It's a very exciting space.
It's extremely exciting, and I'm sure even with the insights as well, that's going to be one thing that is going to probably set us apart from everybody else, and I'm excited for that launch as well. So that wraps up our session. We also obviously open for questions. Q&A is live and ready. And thank you very much for joining us, and have a lovely day further.
Thank you once again for joining us this morning. And we'll just dive straight into the questions. We received one question with regards to the mixing of kind of the tech and investment, and how does it mix? You know, some people might see it as oil and water. Are you an investment professional that knows everything about investments and data science, or are you a data scientist that's integrating into the finance profession? How is Prescient, how are we mixing the two, and how does it work?
It's a very good question. So a lot of us come from different backgrounds, not necessarily finance. Myself and Chloe are definitely more from a data science background, but that doesn't end up being an issue at all, because there's quite a collaborative culture. It's like with anything, if you're talking about it, if you're asking people questions, if that line of communication is just open, then it becomes very easy. Because if you don't understand something about the domain specifically, if someone else doesn't understand anything about your domain, you just ask each other questions and figure it out that way. So that's the way we handle it here. Just walk up to someone's desk, ask them a question, chat about the problem, and see how you can solve it. So yeah, always just transparency and communication is the most important in this situation.
Everyone's very willing to help and answer our questions that we have.
So it's, I mean, we've got quite a diverse portfolio of experience, because you come from, you know, innovation management, you're from the retail sector, lots of big data there, and you're from the telecom sector. Myself being tech and then quite a bit of finance. So it really is about the collaboration, isn't it? And then there's another question that came through, and it's I think this is a great one. Is how do you decide which data sources are worth investing time in? Chloe, I'm going to give this one to you.
Sure. So we start with the hypothesis. So what information can we plausibly get out of this data, and how it would help a particular asset team? So we start with that, and then we actually investigate the data to see how big is it, what quality is it, what granularity is it at. Could we actually use this data to answer the question that we have? And then from there, we'll decide, yes, this is a plausible avenue to explore, and the data is a feasible option to actually answer that question. And then we'll go forth and start explaining and start investigating.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Then I see another question that just came through from one of the viewers. There's some concern about migration to cloud, and then being shocked by the bull, and then there's a bit of a backtrack, either to a hybrid model or stuff like that. How are we going to be avoiding pitfalls?
I think based on the experience, the biggest reason for that, that turnaround would probably be if you haven't planned accordingly, and in most cases it's because of this lift and shift bug, is how I would call it. When you focus on that versus actually focusing on what the cloud has for you as services, I think that's where you have opportunity to be opportunity, and that's most important. Just the understanding that the cloud offers many services that allow you not to have to recreate the middle. Sometimes just lifting and shifting, you tend to just focus on that specific output, whereas you could actually do that more output. Actually just sat down with teams, planned out migration, and actually decide on doing the architecture, leveraging off cloud actually.
That's cool. That's great. See, there's another question. Does Prescient incorporate any automated or algorithmic trading? So on the trading side, or are all the trading decisions ultimately made by the human and investment team? Tim, I'm gonna ask you what's happening on that end.
Yeah, so it's not in the sense that you would usually think about algorithmic trading, where you have a bot that's making the trades for you with a high frequency kind of thing. But at the same time, everything we do is systematic. So everything does have a model behind it. Every decision is modeled before it gets made. So in that way, there is still human intervention, but not that much. There has to be evidence, and it has to be backed by statistics for that decision to be made. So somewhat algorithmic, but also at the same time not completely in.
All right. So the human in the loop is an important one, but it's evidence based. So considering it all, bringing it in, keeping the human in the loop, and it's very systematic on the allocation side. And we don't engage in high frequency trading. So algorithmic trading from that point of view is not something that's I think industry wide either, in terms of the kind of stock selection, jumping in and out of stocks. But it is very, very present in our modeling and decision making chain. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And then while we're on that, there's another question that came through on what kind of data science algorithms are you using?
So we're using a wide variety of things. At the moment, what we're focusing more on is the natural language processing side of things. So very much to get that human side, as we were talking about in the webinar, because once you can analyze spoken words, we can get a bit more of a read on how people are thinking about the markets, and that helps explain that slightly more irrational side of the human side of things. So that's our main focus at the moment, but at the same time, we're also looking into more statistical analysis, that's a bit more away from the machine learning side, and then we're working on some very exciting pure machine learning models using some decision trees, XGBoost, this kind of thing as well. Some nice clustering algorithms there. So we're really looking at quite a wide range at the moment. especially because we're looking at quite a wide range of topics in the investment universe. But yeah, definitely NLPs are the main thing at the moment.
All right, so natural language processing. Nice. Oh, here's an interesting one that I'd love to bounce to Norman. What is Prescient's view on an AI managed fund?
I would, I would say that would be quite an interesting one. I think AI at this moment in time, I feel the buzzword, as we talked about earlier in the webinar, it is something that we need to really take into consideration first before we even consider something to that effect. I think utilizing AI even on a managed fund, I don't think we want to take the human in the loop out of the loop, in all honesty. So at this moment in time, I think it's more about the implementation of AI and how we will be moving forward with it, versus do we actually, or what's our views on AI management. So let's take the baby steps, I always say. Sometimes it's good to move at a good pace and not get too overwhelmed with the buzzword and getting into AI too fast.
That's a great answer. I think is an AI managed fund out of the question? No. Is our data foundation and our AI strategy very important to nail down completely before we start giving it actual cash to manage? Very much so. And I think there's also something to be said about AI governance frameworks that haven't been addressed. We don't have, to my knowledge at least, I'll put a disclaimer there that I can stand to be corrected, but also in South Africa and in Africa, our AI governance structures are not mature enough yet. I was at an AI summit last year where there's still a lot of gaps that are lacking. So, and especially in an industry where we are very much regulated and we are being trusted with people's life savings, we want to be very sure. But is it out of the question? No, it is not. We're all about prototyping, but is the maturity of the framework there right now? No. We are working on an AI strategy and we are solidifying the data foundation, which, in my opinion, as data and engineering is in my title, is incredibly important. Another question, what practical steps and best practices can financial institutions implement to ensure their AI models comply with evolving financial regulators' standards? Norman, I know you've mentioned that there are a couple of compliance issues that are coming up. What are we doing to ensure that we are taking the practical steps from your point of view?
So the first thing is establishing that governance, right, and that team on responsibility, right? So I think that's the first step, is understanding who is responsible and accountable for the implementation of, right? Once that is understood, it's about giving each of the institutions governance, right? So around specific laws, for example, FSP, etc. But a lot of it is all around your data protection, right? And ensuring that these AI models are not moving your data outside of our space. So I think that's the big focus, and best practice is ensure that you know exactly what this model is doing. Ensure that you know exactly what it is reaching out of your network and if it is, right? And ensuring that if you do implement it, it's locked down to that specific environment and not speaking outside of it. I think that's the best practice, is just be extremely mindful of what your model is doing with your data.
And that speaks exactly to the transparency we spoke about. I mentioned it's creating certainty for our clients. We're going to ask clients to step into the future with us. The transparency and the certainty are going to be quite key in times like these. Right. One last question. What are the risks of AI identifying coincidental relationships or correlations and influencing investment decision-making based on these apparent trends between unrelated variables? So there's false correlations, false relationships, false positives, these types of things. Tim, I'm gonna bounce this one to you. What are the risks of integrating AI, which is so topical right now in its various forms? What do you see from your view?
But using AI is somewhat risky because there is always a margin of error, and it can pick up relationships that aren't there. So that's when it becomes extremely important not to just push in any AI algorithm you can. It's very easy to just take something, plug it in, and ooh, it works. But where the biggest part of our work comes in usually is testing the model, testing the robustness of it. We have extremely rigorous testing frameworks that cross-validates every single model we produce against multiple factors. And most of them get back tested since the 1960s to make sure that over a long time frame that relationship holds, and that it's not just something that we're seeing maybe right now that's showing some value, but it has to hold over all time because we wanted to be sure that come next year that model is still producing value. So it's not about just your model choice, but about being extremely thorough with your testing process, and that's how you can guard against that risk.
Sure. So what I'm hearing from you is that there are quite a few risks from just blindly trusting black box processes, and how we're attempting to mitigate, or how we are making sure we mitigate these risks is in that sweet spot between kind of artificial intelligence as Gen AI and ChatGPTs that we're just kind of just giving information, what that overlap is with machine learning and proven statistical techniques and how we're using that in unique ways. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the explainability becomes very important for us as well. So you always want to be able to see if this model is doing something, why is it doing that, rather than just blindly trust it. So the traceability that becomes super important. And with traceability, we're able to look at, or hopefully, identify any form of what is being called hallucinations these days, and kind of false positives. And also, if you've got your standard scorings or F1 scores, all those metrics that we use to identify that's industry standard in our algorithms. All right, well, that wraps up our Q&A. Thank you once again for joining us today, and thank you to the very smart panel that's with me here today. If there are any additional questions, do get in touch with us via email, and we will attempt to address them in time. And other than that, I bid you have a lovely day, and we'll until the next webinar.